2019, I was 33 years old, working as a sales rep that had me traveling city to city across the Midwest. I'd gotten used to living out of a suitcase, airport shuttles, budget meals, and hotels that all started to blur together. Most of the time, I didn't care where I stayed, as long as the bed was clean and the Wi-Fi worked. That week, I checked into a hotel in downtown St. Louis. On the surface, it wasn't bad. The lobby had been updated recently, new carpet, some modern furniture, a fresh coat of paint. But you could tell the building itself was older, the kind of place that had history layered beneath every renovation. Behind the front desk was a clerk in his 20s, polite but distant, who slid me my key card without much small talk. The elevators were tucked into the far corner of the lobby, old brass doors with scratches etched deep into the surface, and a buzzing overhead light that flickered when I pressed the call button. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and noticed right away how dated it felt. The mirrored walls were faded, spotted with small cracks, and the floor buttons looked worn, numbers rubbed down from years of use. A faint hum filled the space, and I could feel the whole cab vibrate as the door slid shut. It was late, and all I wanted was a shower and sleep. I pressed 9. Leaning back against the wall as the elevator groaned and started its slow climb upward. At least, that's where it was supposed to take me, because before I ever reached my floor, the elevator stopped, and the doors slid open onto a hallway I wasn't expecting. The elevator hummed as it climbed, floor numbers glowing faintly above the door. I felt the faint tug of gravity in my stomach as it slowed to a stop. The ding echoed through the cab, and the doors slid open with a groan. I stepped forward automatically, but froze. This wasn't the 9th floor. The hallway outside was dimly lit, lined with wallpaper that looked faded and old. The carpeting was darker, frayed at the edges, nothing like the updated lobby downstairs. A single light bulb flickered at the far end of the hall, throwing shadows that stretched unnaturally long against the walls. I waited for someone to step out, maybe a guest on that floor. But no one came. And when I looked both ways, the hall was completely empty. I frowned, glancing back at the panel inside the elevator. The button for 9 was still lit, glowing faintly. Yet here I was, doors open to a floor that shouldn't have been mine. I pressed the close door button, a little harder than I needed to. The doors shut with another metallic groan, and the elevator lurched back into motion. Moments later, the doors opened again, this time to the bright, renovated hallway of the 9th floor. I let out a nervous laugh, shaking my head as I stepped out. Old buildings did weird things. Maybe the wiring was off. Maybe the elevator just had a mind of its own. Either way, it didn't matter. I dropped my bag on the bed and tried to forget about it. But as I lay there that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop thinking about that hallway. The way it looked, older, like I'd stepped back in time for just a few seconds. And it wouldn't be the last time the elevator took me somewhere I didn't belong. The next evening, I came back late after a client dinner. It was past 11 and the lobby was nearly empty. The clerk at the desk barely looked up as I crossed to the elevator. When the brass doors slid open, I stepped inside, pressed 9, and leaned against the wall. The ride was quiet, except for the low hum of machinery. Then halfway up, the elevator shuddered and stopped. The doors parted, and once again, I was staring at the 6th floor. At least, that's what the little display above the door read, 6. But this hallway wasn't like the others. The lights overhead flickered, most of them dead. The carpet was stained, the wallpaper curling away from the walls in strips. A heavy silence pressed against my ears, thicker than the quiet in the lobby below. I felt the hair on my arms rise. I didn't move a muscle. Then, at the far end of the hallway, I saw him. A man, tall and still, standing perfectly motionless. His face was hidden in the shadows, but I knew he was facing me. The distance between us was enough that I couldn't make out details, but something about his posture, unnaturally straight, head tilted slightly, made my chest tighten. I blinked. The lights flickered once more, buzzing loudly, and in that split second the hallway was empty again. I jabbed at the close door button with my thumb, heart racing. The doors slid shut, and the elevator continued climbing as if nothing had happened. By the time I reached my floor, my hands were trembling. I told myself I was tired, that my eyes had played tricks on me. But when I slid the keycard into my room, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been standing there, watching me from the shadows of that hallway. And the worst part? I knew I would have to ride that elevator again. By the third night, I was dreading the elevator. Every time I walked through the lobby, I caught myself hesitating, half considering the stairs. But 9 floors up after a long day of meetings, my legs never won that argument. It was close to midnight when I stepped inside. The mirrored walls reflected my tired face back at me, pale in the flickering fluorescent light. I pressed 9 and folded my arms, bracing myself for the usual jolt and hum. Halfway up, the elevator shuddered violently. The lights flickered once, twice, then dimmed to a sickly yellow glow. My stomach lurched as the cab groaned, halting between floors. For a moment, I thought it had broken down completely. Then the doors slid open. What I saw wasn't like any other floor in that hotel. The hallway stretched out before me, but it looked wrong. The carpet was worn threadbare, stained with dark patches. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing cracked plaster beneath. Most of the overhead bulbs were dead, leaving the corridor bathed in uneven shadows. The air felt heavy, almost damp, and carried the faintest odor of mold. I gripped the side rail, my thumb hovering over the close door button, but I couldn't move. My eyes locked on the hallway as the silence pressed in, louder than the hum of the elevator itself. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, dragging, echoing from somewhere deep in the corridor. My pulse spiked. I jabbed the button repeatedly. The doors groaned, shuddered, then began to close inch by inch. Just before they shut completely, I saw movement. A figure at the far end of the hallway, standing perfectly still, head tilted slightly as if it had been watching me the whole time. The doors slammed shut, and the cab lurched upward again, rattling so hard I thought the cables might snap. By the time I stumbled into my room, my shirt was damp with sweat. I double-locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed, replaying that hallway over and over in my mind. That floor wasn't on the hotel map, and yet I had seen it. The next morning, I went downstairs with dark circles under my eyes and a knot in my stomach. I hadn't slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that hallway, the peeling wallpaper, the damp air, the figure at the far end. I didn't plan on saying anything, but when I saw the clerk behind the front desk, the words just spilled out. "Hey," I said, my voice lower than I intended. "What's on the 6th floor?" The clerk's eyes flicked up from his computer. For a second, he didn't say anything. Then he forced a smile. "All the floors are guest floors, sir." I shook my head. "Number, I've been there. Twice now. Dark hall, peeling walls, Last night the elevator opened up and I trailed off, realizing how insane I must have sounded. But the clerk's expression had changed. The fake smile was gone, replaced by something more serious. His eyes shifted toward the lobby doors, as if to make sure no one else was listening. Finally, he leaned closer across the desk. "You're not supposed to have seen that." A chill ran down my spine. He lowered his voice further. "That floor was sealed years ago. A guest died there. It was bad. Management closed it off, covered the entrances. But sometimes the elevator still..." He stopped, like he'd already said too much. I stared at him, waiting for more, but he straightened up suddenly, his professional mask snapping back into place. "Enjoy your stay," he said briskly, as if the conversation had never happened. That was all I needed to hear. I went back upstairs, threw my things into my suitcase, and checked out by noon. I didn't care if it meant paying out of pocket for a new place. I wasn't riding that elevator again. Even now, years later, I can't step into an elevator without thinking about it. I keep waiting for the lights to flicker, the cab to shudder, and the doors to open onto a floor that shouldn't exist.